Today we look at the following questions. Why are blacks not receiving COVID vaccines? How are government officials fighting online misinformation? And what superpower does Dr. Jill? This is your Not So News. Representatives of the House pounce on Biden for his apparent lack of equity in vaccine distribution. In an article from The Hill, they report the following: that people of color are receiving vaccines at a rate less than those. According to the COVID Tracking Project, Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the United States have contracted COVID-19 during the pandemic at a higher rate than white Americans. Specifically, Black Americans are more likely to die from COVID-19 than any other racial or ethnic group. Despite this, initial data suggests the vaccines are not reaching these communities. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention released statistics on Monday about the first month of vaccine distribution. Of the people who received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, whose race was known, 11.5% were Latino, while 5.4% were Black. Equally concerning is that the rate of vaccinations is disproportionately lower for healthcare workers among communities of color, the House member continued, citing a Los Angeles Times article. This would lead anyone to question why. From the article, we're made to assume that people of color are just disenfranchised and not receiving the healthcare that they deserve. However, the Times published a recent article which seems to imply that this might be due to a lack of trust in the vaccine. In the article, they state the following headline: fueled by history of mistreatment, Black Americans distrust the new COVID-19 vaccine. And they report the following. A poll released by the Kaiser Family Foundation on December 15th revealed that among racial and ethnic groups, Black Americans are the most hesitant to get a vaccine and continue to remain skeptical. In the survey, only 35% of Black adults said they definitely or probably would not get vaccinated and were more likely than any other group to cite concerns about side effects and the newness of the vaccine. That tracks with the result of a Pew Research Center poll published earlier this month, in which only 42% of Black Americans said they would consider taking the vaccine, compared to 63% of Hispanics and 61% of white adults who would. These surveys come as the nation's top health leaders urge Black people to trust the vaccine, hosting live events with Black health professionals at the forefront. These individuals rightfully they were told there was no way that a vaccine would be created within a year. They were told that this vaccine was created under the rule of a Nazi white supremacist bigot. Their governors, mayors, and even the vice president expressed their distrust in the vaccine. So what can we expect? Continuing COVID-19 coverage, Foreign Policy reports that vaccine nationalism harms everyone and protects no one. This comes from a WHO report that stating the potential issue of developed countries using the vaccines before donating them to other countries. Foreign Policy reports the following. At present, rich countries with just 16% of the world's population have bought up 60% of the world's vaccine supply. Many of these countries aim to vaccinate 70% of their adult population by mid-year in pursuit of herd immunity. But COVAX, the multilateral mechanism created by the World Health, together with a coalition of epidemic preparedness innovations in Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to ensure that vaccines reach all people everywhere, is struggling to purchase enough dosage to cover just 20% of the population of lower income countries by the end of 2020. Vaccine allocation must not become a zero-sum game. Vaccine nationalism is not just morally indefensible. It is epidemiologically self-defeating and clinically counterproductive. Market-driven mechanisms are insufficient to achieve the goal of stopping the pandemic by achieving herd immunity. Vaccines. Limited supplies and overwhelming demand create winners and losers. Neither is morally or medically acceptable during a pandemic. Allowing the majority of the world's population to go unvaccinated will not only perpetuate needless illness and deaths and the pain of ongoing lockdowns, but also spawn new virus mutations as COVID-19 continues to spread among unprotected populations. Unchecked spread can result in emergence of more contagious variants, leading to steep rise in cases. This is a vicious cycle. Faster spread means more people are being infected and more people are dying as healthcare systems become overwhelmed. This is just a reminder that the main issue with COVID-19 vaccines is not distribution, but creating enough doses. Jeff Bezos announced today that he would be stepping down as the CEO of Amazon and handing off his role to the executive of AWS, Andy Jassy. This comes as there was a recent controversy with AWS and its actions in taking down Parler and potentially breaking the contract that required a 30-day notice to be taken down. NBC News reports the following on what Bezos' new role in the would be in the company that he had founded. The announcement set off alarm bells on Wall Street and throughout the business community. Though the transition does not necessarily portend any significant changes to Amazon's business. Amazon reported a year of record growth on Tuesday, including a 38% increase in net sales from 2019, netting the company $21 billion in income, nearly double from the year before. Investors didn't seem fazed by the news either. Amazon's share price was up about 1.5% from the following announcement. Bezos stepped away from Amazon at a time when its market value hovers around $1.7 trillion, making it one of the most valuable companies in the world. It remains to be seen how active Bezos will be in Amazon's business in his new role. Several major tech executives have stepped down as CEO and remained intimately involved in their company's business, including Larry Ellison of Oracle and Bill Gates at Microsoft. Bezos remains one of Amazon's biggest stockholders. This really just hits on how good Amazon has been doing in the last year, while the rest of the company has struggled. They had a 35% or 38% increase in their net sales, which is just a crazy increase. And especially with controversy with AWS, we need to look a little bit at misinformation in technology and the potential actions that government officials are. Breitbart reports that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis launches ambitious crackdown on big tech. In it, he gave the following regulations that he is trying to enforce. They include mandatory opt-outs from big tech content filters, a solution to tech censorship first proposed by Breitbart News in 2018, a private right of action for Florida citizens against tech companies that violate this condition, fines of $100,000 per day levied on tech companies that suspend candidates for elected office in Florida from their platforms, daily fines for any tech company that uses their content and user-related algorithms to suppress or prioritize the access of any content related to a political candidate or a cause on the ballot, greater transparency requirements, disclosure requirements enforced by Florida's election authorities for tech companies that favor one candidate over another, and power for the Florida Attorney General to bring cases against tech companies that violate these conditions under the state's Unfair and Deceptive Practices Act. The main question that's being asked now is, what is this condition about not being able to suspend candidates? And what does it mean to be a candidate? Can anyone now run for a random seat on a board of elections throughout the country and meet this condition? It's not unheard of for there to be political offices that someone from out of state can run for. So, we'll see what happens. However, the New York Times took a completely opposite approach of this and is getting a little bit of criticism from the Federalist. In their story, the New York Times experts urge Biden to establish Orwellian reality czar to dictate truth. This comes from the following New York Times article, A Point of Realities Are. Several experts I spoke with recommended that the Biden administration put together a cross-agency task force tackled disinformation and domestic extremism, which would be led by someone like a reality czar. The Federalist gives the following review. The ultimate truth official who would work for the government, the author suggested, would be responsible for dictating and mitigating the spread of information in the United States and could engage with the ever-truth-wielding Silicon Valley giants, such as Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Apple, and Google to implement new policies and evaluate which information should be disseminated. This just leads us to the vast differences that's happening in both parties on tech. One party is looking to open up the conversation, while the other is looking to another political story that's been happening in the last week was the leader of the Lincoln Project, John Weaver, was getting allegations that he approached a 14-year-old boy for, sexual acts. Brian Gerdusky gives the following story on Twitter. The Lincoln Project on Podcast Today said they only became outraged at the John Weaver allegations when a New York Times reported that he approached a 14-year-old boy. Apparently, offering jobs for sex to a 19-year-old is totally fine. Rick Wilson keeps saying that people who were in gay Twitter and media people in New York City and Washington. Rick Wilson keeps saying the only people who knew were gay Twitter and media people in New York City and Washington, D.C. It's called election Twitter, not gay Twitter. And Karl Rove was not a media personality when he reported this in 1988. Also, it's ridiculous to imagine that a group of media hungry as the Lincoln Project says reporters and people in the media knew. They have more connections in media than I do. They deny all culpability, but insist that everyone that they knew about John Weaver except them. And in their defense, say they heard about weird shit but did nothing, meaning they heard about my allegations of grooming and did nothing. This just is another story of, using someone's position to abuse others, which unfortunately has just become a trend that we're seeing throughout the nation. Even after getting majority of the Senate, it looks like a $15 minimum wage is unlikely to get passed. Reported by the Huffington Post, Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia, is reported as saying that he would not support the push. He states the following: I'm supportive of an increase that it's responsible and reasonable, and in my states, that's $11, Manchin told congressional reporters, adding that that rate should account for inflation. Manchin is bucking his own party's leadership. House Democrats have already passed the Raise a Wage Act, which would phase in a $15 minimum wage over several years. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is behind the proposal, as is President Joe Biden. Manchin hits a point that the left often overlooks, with things like the minimum wage. These measures could be passed in states rather than federally. Currently, no state holds a $15 minimum wage. DC does have the $15 minimum wage, but the next closest is California, who's already $2 per an hour behind. It seems like a bluer state like California would have no problem passing this kind of minimum wage in their local state. Why should someone in Alabama need the same wage as someone in California when the cost of living is completely different? This is just, a question of getting back to Federalist principles in governing our nation. Not everything needs to be done at a federal. Finally, The Hill reports on how Dr. Joe Biden, notably they forgot her title, shared a Instagram post and how there was a image of Jill Biden giving fresh vegetables from the White House garden that she planted. In the post, Michelle Obama posts the following on Instagram: so thankful for this beautiful care package from our amazing FLOTUS, First Lady. These fresh veggies from the White House kitchen garden were such a wonderful and delicious surprise. Love you, Jill. It's amazing that Jill was able to grow all these vegetables in just 2 weeks. With those kinds of superpowers, she may even be able to fix climate change. And this is your February 3rd Not So News. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Have a good one.